All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever webinar for FEM. We are so excited to have you guys come on board and just, be with us on this journey. I'm going to share my screen just because we had a few slides prepared. Yes. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, this is our first ever webinar. This is something Nadia and I have been working on behind the scenes for a couple of months now. So this is our baby, and we hope you guys enjoy this as much as we want you to enjoy this. Nats, do you want to?
Yeah, I think if we will take so I'm Nadia. Hi, everyone. I know we don't have our videos on, but we'll kind of go through a really quick overview of the agenda, and then just a little short background of why we're here and kind of what brought us here. And really going to hand it over to Asil, kind of like the main star of the show, I'm going to say for today. So we're going to talk about FEM, kind of how it came about, the intro, and then the interesting Money Monsters workshop. I think for those who can stay for the whole piece, definitely stay. I've gone through this with Asil a little bit with Tomi, and it was quite enlightening, and it's not something you typically hear or see from most areas, or when you will go into like a bank to learn about financial planning or advice. And so part of what we've been really trying to do is stay a bit more niche on that side. So from my end, I really got involved because I'm actually really bad with money. And so one of the things I say that because we didn't want this to be a session about somebody who's an expert just like talking to you explicitly, but really getting you engaged and starting to learn about your behaviors and your thought processes about how you think about money and what that really means. So for both myself and Tomi, we kind of met in a master's program about a year and a half to 2 years ago, and it was a topic we kept coming across. And we're like, why isn't someone doing something about this? Or why don't we have this as an area that we can discuss? And then we really just got to a point, well, there's no one else doing it, but we could do it. And so that's essentially how it started. So not a professional by any standard, but also really trying to get the right people to help you guys kind of come along the journey with us as we go through this process and learning. And so I'll hand it over to Tomi, who can kind of give her background and then take it from there.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Nadia was saying, it was just from our conversation, it was very interesting that we had good jobs, we thought we were doing okay, and then when we really thought about it, it's like we should be doing better when it comes to our finances, and we just don't have a good group of people that we just talk to if we had questions about investments or real estate or just saving and budgeting. It's like, why is it such a hush hush topic? And it should be more open, because we find guys can talk about it a lot more freely than our girlfriends or like females do. So we just want to get that that I guess barrier out of the way, and hopefully everyone can they can find something to take away from this session and hopefully future sessions, because like Nadia said, we're learning as we go along on this journey, and we just want to share what we learned with everyone. So without further ado, I just want to introduce our amazing guest speaker today, who is Asil Albaba. If my slides could just work. There we go. She is someone who's actually worked as a financial planner for the past 10 years, and she's worked with 4, I believe, out of the 5 big banks in Canada. And throughout her career, she just realized people had, they see money as a taboo subject, and they had a really hard time navigating the topic. So she made a career change to switch to becoming a financial therapist and a money mindset coach. And very recently, she actually started her own company called Holistic Optimal Wealth. And she's so passionate about helping her clients fulfill their financial goals and really helping them understand how they think and feel and behave with their money. So still, I'll pass the virtual mic over to you, and you can take us through the main portion of this.
Thank you so much. This is a lovely introduction, and I absolutely feel honored to be in the space with you guys tonight. So the beautiful thing about, I'm actually the host now, and it's asking me to admit people.
Oh, okay. I know you have slides to
pop up, and I'm like, admit people. I see. Okay, no worries. I'll keep an eye on it. I am happy to do that. Okay, so hello again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be distracted. I just didn't expect that. So as Tommy was saying, I spent years in the financial planning field in the Canadian banks, and it was a very fulfilling experience, but I definitely felt something was missing in the conversation. Because when you talk to people about their money from a financial planning perspective, you're dealing with their logical side. However, a lot of our problems lie in the emotional space, and I was very passionate about integrating this holistic approach to looking at our wealth. I'm right now a psychotherapist in training, so halfway through, I'm almost licensed as a full psychotherapist. But in the meantime, I started this work, and I belong to the Financial Therapy Association, which is a group of very passionate individuals like who are interested in looking at the emotions of money. Now, what you're going to be seeing today, this is just a glimpse into different areas of this line of work, but I thought it's a good way to start, which is introducing you to your money monster. And these are different archetypes of monsters that I created, so I can help individuals sort of point and name the problems that they're dealing with. And there's a big advantage to calling out your monster, because there's a shift in how we feel when we say something along the lines of, I am bad with money, versus I have this challenge that I'm dealing with. So it's similar to somebody saying, I am a failure, versus saying, I failed a test. So when we put a name to this monster and we're able to understand it and look deeper into why this monster was created in our lives, then we're able to overcome these challenges with time, versus feeling that this is just part of who we are and there's no way around it. Another thing I'd like you to know, I'm going to start sharing my screen here in a second. So this is the money monster. This is what I'd love to start. I'm not going to read every single word on here, but what I really want you to understand is, as we go through this work, a lot of money is tangled up with a lot of shame. It brings up a lot of emotion, and that's why it's a very complex topic, because it's never just about the money itself. There's so much wrapped up with this topic, from what we tell ourselves about our self-esteem, our self-worth, our identity, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with the world. It's a very complex topic. So naturally, we're going to have different shame and different emotions come up as we talk about it. So I would love for you to kind of practice the mantra, no shame, no blame, because it's something we need to be continuously reminding ourselves when we, tackle these issues that are never easy to talk about. Another thing I want to talk to you about is as I'm going to start sharing my screen again in a second. I will share with you different monsters tonight. There's 8 in total. Each monster have different traits and different characteristics. Start taking notes about which one you resonate with, but it doesn't mean that you have to resonate with every single point in that monster. There may be certain things in that monster that may not apply to you, but you still relate to a lot of it. Still note it down. And I'd like for you also to think about the people in your lives that may have different monsters and how it impacts you. So let's make this session interactive as I go and introduce you to the different monsters. Feel free to share with me your thoughts, your questions along the way, and let's just make it fun and interactive. Somebody is just being admitted as we speak. Fernanda, welcome aboard. All right, I'm just making sure she's connecting. Okay, hi Fernanda, we're just about to start introducing the monsters, so welcome aboard. So the first monster for today is called Spendula, and these are names I just came up with to make it fun to talk about, because it's not an easy topic. But Spendulas are those monsters that, if you have the Spendula monster, then you are somebody who cares deeply about the things you buy. You care about buying luxurious items. You may even go out of your way to buy luxurious items. You get an ego boost when people notice your consumption. And if somebody notices something you're wearing, you may even exaggerate how much you paid for it. and even if somebody doesn't ask you, you feel the need to sort of flash the things that you own or the things that you bought, and you constantly think about them. So you know, the Spendula monster, when they think about their career and their education choices, they're thinking about career opportunities that allows them to live a certain lifestyle because they crave it. They care a lot about having that social status. So they don't really know how much they spend. They don't have a budget. They don't necessarily keep track of their spending habits at all. And they get an ego boost when somebody notices their consumption. So it's very common for Spendulas to, you know, if they like if they have an Instagram account, for example, for their brand names to be showcased, their latest purchases to be showcased there, so they get an ego boost out of that. So usually they're struggling with their spending habits, and they're just not sure how much they're spending anyway. So that's the Spendula. Okay, somebody's just being admitted into the room. Then we have the werewolf. The werewolf is an interesting monster because these are people who also care a lot about shopping, but they don't necessarily care about what kind of shopping they're I'm just being distracted because there's some people still messaging me to be admitted. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, I just admitted everybody, I think. So the werewolf is somebody who cares a lot about spending as well, but then they don't care about the brand names. They just distract themselves from internal emotions they're feeling. So if they're feeling sad, then it's time to go to the mall. If they're feeling happy, it's time to go to the mall. It's just shopping for them is just a habit to medicate other feelings they're experiencing in their life. So they justify their shopping through feeling a sense of entitlement. You often hear them say something like, it's been such a rough day at work, I'm gonna go and treat myself for this. Or, you know, it's been just a very tough period in my life, I'm gonna go on this vacation and I don't care how I'm gonna afford it. So usually they're experiencing some sort of internal, you know, unbalance in their life. Usually they're unhappy because of something. And usually shopping is the answer. At least that's how they see it. So buying stuff makes them feel good in that moment. So it's very interesting because it's a vicious cycle that feeds itself. So they're feeling or experiencing a specific emotion. They go and buy something and they feel that spending money on certain things would help them feel better. So they get a rush that's immediately followed that purchase. And then after that rush, there's a crash and a guilt. So it's a cycle, vicious cycle that repeats itself. So they struggle with controlling their impulses. So the best way I like to think about this is similar to our habits with food, for example. People who are emotional eaters, you know, you just feel like you want to eat something, and then after you eat it, you feel guilty about it. But then you feel that you want to eat something, you know, after that, and you continue to do it, and it's a vicious cycle that feeds itself. And often one of the things that they say a lot is, where did my money go? Like anytime a werewolf looks at their credit card statements, they're usually shocked by how much it is, because they never expect it to be as much as it is. So that's the werewolf. Then you have the wealthless monster. And like the name suggests, this is a monster that tries to avoid thinking and making decisions about money no matter what. So any of these monsters could be anywhere in the net worth or cash flow spectrum, by the way. So, you know, it's not about how much money you have or how much money you don't have. It's more about how you feel about money. It's how the relationship you have with money that we're really trying to focus on here. Now, the wealthless monsters, they, like, even when they're forced to look at money, they somehow feel very overwhelmed and possibly even dumb, and they just try to find distractions and procrastinate dealing with this tasks. So when I used to be a financial planner, I had a lot of people in my client base who were wealthless monsters. They would procrastinate meeting with me And even when they have an appointment, they would be likely to schedule it or just come up with an excuse to why they can't show up. And it's not necessarily because something came up and they can't show up, but it's more about they're trying to avoid dealing with the situation. So they struggle from making decisions around money. They just feel a lot like, anxiety is somewhat normal for people to feel about money, but wealthless monsters in particular feel a higher level of anxiety than the average person. And the best way I can describe it is somebody who feels like they're a deer in the headlights. They feel like, frozen. They just feel frozen. Another word could be like the ostrich hand in the sand. I can't remember how that saying goes. Then you have the victim. What I find interesting about the victim is that any of these monsters, actually, the pattern that shows up in your life with how you deal with money, more often than not, shows up in other areas in your life. So if you are somebody who, like the wealthless monster, who tries to avoid thinking or making decisions about anything that makes you uncomfortable, in this particular case, it's money, then most likely you're already display this pattern in other areas in your life. And that's the interesting thing to note here. And that's what makes this topic very complex, because it's never just about money. Victim is another example of that, because, how many people do you know in your life that plays the victim card? And victim is somebody who truly views money as a negative thing. They always have a story about something that went wrong with them. So they feel self-pity and they struggle with low self-esteem and a poor self-image. And victims are people who genuinely, almost expect that other people will take care of money for them. They almost say something along the lines that, I'm just not good with money, so might as well you take care of it for me. I see a lot of that when I used to work with couples. One person would play the victim card and just puts the responsibility fully onto the other partner, and that's obviously not a healthy way to deal with it. So they feel genuinely helpless, and they often, this is very interesting, they often have a lot of rescue fantasies. And what that means is they fantasize about what's their way out. It could be, I'm gonna win the lottery, or I'm gonna marry somebody rich, or I'm gonna just magically get this inheritance. And it's okay to do it, and once in a while just think about something for fun. But victims generally engage in this type of thinking more and more and more. And it's almost one way to cope with their unhappy reality, is just to daydream about fantasies of how they're going to be rescued. And often these fantasies include somebody else rescuing them, not necessarily them mustering the power to overcome their challenge. And that's why they feel helpless, because they don't think they have what it takes to overcome the challenge. So after the victim, we have the strings attached punisher. And just like the name suggests, there's a lot of strings attached with this particular monster. Now, the strings attached punisher are usually people who have wealth. They're usually respected by their peers, by their family members. They're probably one of those people who are responsible in the family, and other people come up for them or come up to them to seek advice or even financial support. So if there's this person in your family that usually bails other people out, usually some of the characteristics of these individuals may be that there's a lot of fear in letting go of their money, and there's a lot of strings attached, and the conditions are wrapped up around these financial dealings. So they're often lecturing others about what they should be doing with money. Since they are somebody who most likely have a good net worth, they feel like they know how it works, and they're entitled to give advice to other people of what they should or shouldn't do with their money. So the strings attached monsters uses money to control and take power, and even maybe punish other people around them. And they think about it this way: they're monsters who feel that they have emotional needs, and they use their financial resources to buy their emotional needs. So that's why there's strings attached, and that's why the flow of money in and out of their life is just murked with all these unhealthy emotions around it. So this sentence is usually very common for the strings attached monster, who's often thinking, what's in it for me? So if I have to give out this money, what is in it for me? They're thinking about a lot of things from a very transactional perspective. So even though on the outside they may look as very successful, they're actually filled with fear. They're fearful, and that's why there's a lot of conditions around their money, whether it's explicit or implicit. Now, zombies, they're comparable to the classic Scrooge. So these are individuals who have money, but they're genuinely fearful about spending. So it feels, any spending that is spent on what they think is non-essential is almost looked like it's a crime. Like, why would you, money is meant to be saved, not spent. They love making money. They love saving it. They definitely would spend time putting on a budget and sticking to it. But they actually underspend. And I recall, for example, this time I had a client who was a very successful stockbroker, and his salary was over $700,000 a year because he had a very successful stock trading business. And he would not live on over $70,000 a year in expenses. Like, he would only spend 10% of his overall income, excluding the bonus he would get. And that's because he was literally raised in such a way that really prevented him from seeing money as something he can enjoy. So often enough, zombies are, I'm not sure what just happened. Nadia, is that you? Okay. Anyways. So zombies are usually, I lost my train of thought. I don't know if you guys saw that, but there was like some sort of drawing on the screen. So they usually feel that, they're adverse. I was talking about the childhood. Yeah, most zombies grew up in a very hard, like a lot of adversity was in their childhood, whether it's political instability, whether it's economical instability, whether they come from like low-income families or whatever the case may be. That's why they grew up around a lot of fear, and therefore there's a misconception about the use of money. They feel that money is a tool for necessity. So even when they start having money, even when they start accumulating wealth, it's still hard for them to spend it. So it's pretty much the opposite of the spandula, which was the first monsters I introduced you to. And the best way to look at a zombie is people would think they're just very cheap and not living life fully. Then you have the Kraken. The Kraken are the monster that wishes, hopes, and just dreams for a better life. And the Krakens are individuals who, as a society, we really screwed up how we look at positions that are meant to help. Like, for example, social workers, doctors, therapists, nonprofit organizations, people who love to volunteer. Most people in that space have a very hard time understanding how they can make money and help people at the same time, as if these two things contradict each other. So they genuinely love helping people. However, they have a very misleading understanding of what money is or is not, and it's disempowering because they feel that money is evil indirectly. So people who struggle with this monster are usually also either very spiritual or very religious, or just in a very helping environment, that just struggle with, how can I make money when others are suffering? How can I be rich when there's so much poverty around me? How can I buy this luxurious item when I know there's children starving somewhere. So there's always these this like this discomfort. Sorry about that. There's discomfort with wealth and what wealth may bring you, or also how wealth may corrupt you. There's also these notions that wealth corrupts people. Yeah. And then finally, you have the money addict. And the money addict are those individuals who are always looking for ways to make more money. So they're always coming up with, whether they could be the workaholics. They're focusing a lot on their career and their pursuits. They're always up to something, whether it's like side hustles and, furthering their education and just continuously on a go attitude. And that's because they never think, no matter how much money they accumulated, there's never enough. And that's the struggle they deal with. So maybe at the start of their career, they think, okay, once I start making 100,000, I'd feel better. And then they start making 100,000, the next thing is 200,000. And then it's, it continues. That line that they look to achieve always is pushed forward. Every time they get to it, now it's something else and something else and something else. And usually it's never ending. And that's because they have an internal disconnection, and they just feel like money and success is it's one way to create this sense of worthiness, or, I matter, or I can. And that's certainly something they're unable to settle. So they're always looking for ways to make up for this emptiness that they feel of some sort. So ultimately, these 8 monsters fall under, this three categories. You're either a saver, you're a spender, or you're an avoider. That's ultimately the 3 main categories that encompasses these monsters. And the interesting thing is, you can, at different stages in your life, you may have experienced different monsters. You may at this moment be experiencing you may be battling with different monsters at the same time, and that's fine and that's normal. And also at different stages in your life, some monsters may be more dominant than others, and that's also common. So the reason this is important to talk about is because we always think about fixing our money issues by, putting a budget sheet, or just learning how to invest, or putting a financial plan together. And yes, absolutely, it's important to tackle the practical sides of money. But what I wanted to have a conversation with you guys today about is actually talking about the emotional and psychological sides of money that have, impact on our overall health in the long run, our impact on the overall health, financial health, because it's truly not just about how much money we end up making. It's how we feel about money, how it impacts our day-to-day. And it's also about experiencing a balanced flow of money in and out of our life, where we're not only struggling with our with what that means for us, but also being able or feeling worthy and capable. There's 2 components that I always identify in my clients. It's somebody is either feeling not worthy or not capable, and usually they feed off each other. So I actually want to open it up to some discussion and just chat with you guys about it. I'm not sure, am I still the host?
You are still the host.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to seeing, questions. What are some of the things that resonated with you? Is there a specific monster that resonated with you? And these are, I'm actually going to show you some of the, which I'm happy to email. I told you there's a lot of self-reflection that this work brings, and it's required.
I actually want to ask if everyone's comfortable just like putting in the chat what monsters sort of resonated, if 1 or 2 like popped in your mind that, oh my gosh, I think I do a little bit of this. and throughout my life. But yeah, just to get some conversation going to see if some of us are leaning towards being spendular, because I can attest to that a little bit, or whatever else, that whatever of the monsters actually popped out to you. Yeah, we have werewolf already. Anyone else want just jump in and just say zombie? That's interesting. Well,
I'd say werewolves too.
werewolf. Yeah.
And if you have questions, please let me know. I'm happy to expand further. But this is very important work, and I feel like it's talking about money from an angle that's often missed, because we grew up, most cultures and universally, where money is usually taboo and we don't talk about it. So in my experience, my dad was a kraken because he was a communist. So my dad always thought that wealth brings corruption, and you should never be, subconsciously he rejected wealth and just pushed it away from his life. And my mom was a victim. She grew up in a society that didn't allow her to explore herself and her career. And I come from Lebanon, which is a Middle Eastern culture. So her identity was mainly that of a homemaker. She didn't know what money is and how to deal with that side of life. So I grew up with a kraken and a victim, and my relationship with money was very odd starting in the early stages in my 20s. Yes, Francis, absolutely. So that's a great question about how to deal with these monsters. So there's layers to this answer, and here's what are some of the things I'll offer you. Anytime you're experiencing any monster, there's a lot of emotional themes that are being expressed through these monsters. So there's not one solution. The idea is to work further to understand what are the emotional unfinished business that you're using this monster to express them through. And when you bring awareness on what are the emotional things that you're trying to heal through money, then you're able to start resolving the issue. So for example, I'll expand on that. In other words, money is a vehicle that you use to express your emotions. So somebody you and I can have the exact same monster, but then we're dealing with different issues. So it's really not about how to deal with that monster specifically, it's how to deal with the issues underlying that monsters that created that monsters in our life. So for example, the spendulas mainly work, the spendula, from a practical level, spendulas spend a lot of money on acquiring brand names because they feel that it makes them more respectful, or they're seeking some sort of status, and therefore they, just give me one second. Sorry. This is the interesting world of COVID. There's like tiny condos and multiple people living in the same place. So I was giving what was my, sorry again. So the monster I was dealing with here was the spendula.
Yeah.
So a spendula, for example, has self-esteem issues and self-worth issues, and sometimes even self-love issues. So they feel they're not worthy. Something is missing in how they feel about themselves, and they seek this external aspects of their life to just make them feel better about who they are. Now, from a practical level, obviously you can put all the budgeting in the world, but this is not going to resolve the issue when the underlying theme of it is more of a self-worth and self-love. And therefore, to deal with these monsters, the best way, before you even start on the practical level of money, where you have a systems in place and a financial advisor and an investment plan, you understand why is it that you have the monster that you have, and what emotional issue are you trying to deal with. So for example, I'm going to share my screen here quickly. These are questions I would invite you to think about as you're reflecting further on the monster. So a lot of you already started to resonate with some, but there's a lot more to it, and I'll just give you some of the examples. So think about the earliest money experiences that you can remember where this monster was born. And it's interesting because what you now may have the conscious awareness to understand that you're dealing with a specific problem today. This particular problem at one point was your solution. So for example, if you today acknowledge that spending over my budget is a problem and it's not sustainable and it's going to prevent me from retiring or saving money for my home, or even paying for my future, if you have kids or whatever the case may be. At one point, your spending habits were your escape from something else that was very emotionally hard for you to deal with. So what you were able to identify today as a problem was at one point in your life a solution. And therefore, it's important to remind ourselves of the no blame, no shame mantra, so that we can actually understand the underlying emotional needs that we're actually trying to fulfill by having the relationship with money we currently have, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's another question I would ask you, like, what are the emotional needs you're trying to do? Some individuals, they, like, for example, the money addict, the emotional need for the money addict is to feel that I am capable, I am worthy, I matter. And that's why they continuously want to prove something. And they're usually very successful. There's nothing wrong with being driven and being, ambitious. I definitely resonate with that. I work a lot, but there's days where you need to understand that you're working not because you're escaping another thing you don't want to deal with. And usually when imbalances are created in our lives, usually one thing takes over the other. And then another thing you would think about is, what are the monsters that are prominent in your experience from the people around you? Parents and partners. These are big, big, big ones, because you can think about what kind of monsters were my parents dealing with and how did it impact my monster. Maybe you're just the same, or maybe you went to the other extreme. So in times where if somebody was raised by a zombie, for example, you may retaliate and become somebody who's like a spatula, because you're rebelling against how uncomfortable dealing with a zombie has been. And I recall this one time, for example, where one of my clients, he was an executive, very successful executive, and he was making a lot of great bonuses and great income. At least $150,000 a year was like his minimum over the last 5 years. So he was in my office. He was in his late 50s, and he was in my office because he needed to refinance his home. Actually, he thought he needed to refinance his home, and then we realized that that's not even an option. He needed to sell his home altogether and downsize, because he could not keep up with living in the home he was living in. And then just looking at, I can on paper, I can easily do this for him. I can easily create a new plan and tell him, here's your new budget. But then I looked at him and I said, while I can do this work from a financial plan perspective, if I don't dig deeper and understand what's happening in your emotional relationship with money, then you're going to be sitting in my office 5 years from now, needing to downsize again. So what's happening? What's going on here? And he started crying because this is the first time anybody asked him about his feelings with money, his emotions about money. And it turned out that he was raised by a father who survived the Depression. So his father was extremely frugal. He couldn't spend money on his kids. He was known to be very cheap, and that created a lot of tension between him and his kids. So now that my client became a father, years after that, he promised and vowed to himself that he doesn't want to be remembered as this cheap dad. So he went to the other extreme, where he would spend a lot of money on his kids and never know how to set boundaries, never knew how to say no, to the point where he put his own retirement in jeopardy, where he needed to downsize his home in his late 50s when most people his age are now looking to retire, he's looking to just simply keep up with his own expenses. So that's why this work is important, because it's complex. It's very interesting to know what are we trying to deal with here when we're trying to, what is our relationship with money representing? What are we trying to escape as far as the emotions that we're always dealing with? So let me see some of the questions here. What is the most common money monster archetype in your experience, and what is the most difficult to deal with? Great question. I've been doing the money monster workshop for a few months, mostly during COVID, because in the past I used to work with banks, and it's not very popular to try this work in banks, because they freak out at things that are just not under like compliance. So I would say I tested it at about 100 people, and the most common ones are the avoiders. So the avoiding category is the most common one. But here's something I would also bring up. In situations like COVID, or anything that creates a trauma in our life, which COVID would be identified as a societal trauma, it's not just an individual. People sometimes have a polarized reaction. So they either live like there's no tomorrow and they become spenders because now we just have to live and enjoy the moment, or they become super fearful of the future and now they're hoarding. So I, be cautious and be reflect on how has your money how have your money situations, or the way you feel about it or the way you deal with it, how has it changed post-COVID or during COVID, because it's not done yet, if any. And I'll tell you something, like personally, I used to buy Starbucks lattes once in a while, well, a lot. When I used to work in the corporate world, I worked on Bay Street, and it was just part of the culture, and I didn't think much of it, honestly. And now the other day, I haven't bought a latte for so long. Most places were closed. And just the other day, I went to a place and I bought my latte, and it was like she said $7, and I was like, whoa, $7. And I started feeling weird about it. I'm like, why? And I felt almost guilty, and I felt something is off about it. I don't know, but I know that it's a result of COVID. Now I feel that I have this additional layer of fear and spending more than I did in the past as a result of COVID. And there's more layers to it, because I'm also a new entrepreneur. I'm sure there's other layers beyond just COVID that I'm dealing with, but it's very interesting to start exploring the relationship you have with money across the different transactions you go through throughout your day, and notice what each of them makes you feel, and start to recognize patterns, whether it's a conversation you're having with somebody, or whether it's a purchase you're making, or whether you're looking at your bank account, or whether you have to pay bills. Just become more aware of what's happening in your experience, and start reflecting on what this is telling you, so you can identify it and work past it, versus just push it under a rug. So the other part of your question, so to answer your question, Alessandra, I said the most common are usually the avoiders, and the most difficult to deal with are honestly those who are in denial. It's not necessarily a specific monster, it's just those who are in denial. These are the ones who are the most difficult to deal with. And when somebody is in denial about the challenges they're dealing with, they're not ready for that change. Okay, so I'm gonna read this up. Alio, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. I grew up in a rural village and struggled with money growing up. Now that I have money and having a decent job, I struggle to say no to my family members when they request for money. This behavior makes me put a hold on my goals, such as buying a house and doing my MBA. How can I deal with this? I love your question. And I think this is one of the, super interesting challenges, and I don't think there's a right answer for everybody. Like the idea, Alio, for in this work, and what I'm most humbled with is I'm not somebody who comes and tells you the answers in the way where here's what you should do. Never. You know, you should never listen to a professional that tells you here's what you should do. My job is to guide you to find your own answer in a way that is authentic to you. So I would love to have this conversation further with you, and I'm more than happy to answer further questions like that, because I would need to ask so much more questions for you to get to a space where you feel you're empowered with your own answer and you just know what your next steps are. But I know the challenges you're dealing with, it's a very common challenge from people who share your circumstances. I can relate to it as well. And there's certain ways where you can put boundaries for yourself without jeopardizing your own goals. And I tell you this, you know, another client of mine was in her late 50s. She was making a very decent amount of money, never had kids, and never was married. And at her age, with her level of income, with no dependents, you would expect that she would have had at least $1 million saved. I'm not even exaggerating, based on the projection from a financial plan perspective. And she not only didn't have $1 million, she actually had that at that time when I was working with her. And I was shocked because she's never been able to overcome that struggle that you're just sharing with me right now. For her, it was a continuous thing that just lasted up until the time I met her in her 50s. So it's a brave question, and I'm very proud of you to have asked it, but it takes some work to figure out what these boundaries are for you and how can you navigate them in such a way where you continue to express your love to give and help, but without self-sabotaging yourself in that process. And that's very important. If you identify money master of your parent and partner, what would be the advice on how to have a conversation with them about it? So there's actually a framework on how to have conversations with partners, or not necessarily just partners. This framework was done for partners, but I think it can apply for other people as well. And the idea, if your partner is ready to have this conversation, that's when you have it. You don't just come and tell your partner, you know what, you're a worthless monster and we're gonna have this conversation right now. That's not how it works. If both people need to be in a space where they're ready and willing. Ready and willing are two different things, and two important things to be coexistent for that conversation to at least start on the right track. So when somebody's ready and willing, then you can there's few conversations or questions that I'm happy to also provide you with. And the idea is to also recognize that everybody brings their own baggage to this equation. It's never about the monsters or what's going on in this present moment. There's a lot of unfinished business in the past, and the crazy part about this is the unfinished business from the past that we're still dealing with today may have nothing to do with money, but we use money as a vehicle to express this particular emotion. So and that's why sometimes if it's a complex thing that you're dealing with, maybe you need a third party to facilitate the process, to be a moderator to the conversation. So it depends on the severity of the situation you're dealing with your partner, if you want to have that discussion alone, or if you want to ask a moderator or a trained professional to facilitate the conversation. But the idea is to not force your partner into this conversation, because it's not going to get you anywhere. You both need to be on the same page, at least in your intention. Setting the right intention and making sure that you're addressing the problem and pointing at the problem versus pointing at each other. So there's a big difference between telling your partner, you spend so much and something is wrong with how you spend, and you're just pointing the finger and you're blaming them, because that's just destructive, versus, you know, we have a cash flow issue and we need to address this cash flow issue and we need to sit down and talk about it. So it's not, you're not attacking their personality, you're attacking the problem. That's just one out of many other tools, but it's a very unique scenario, and I would say it depends on the severity of the problem you're trying to address. I live a very modest life. I'm in a long distance relationship with my wife, and it requires me to travel every year and practically spend all my savings and start fresh all over again. Ooh, wow. It's, I can see the dilemma in that. You know, Aleo, one of my favorite quotes is, we don't lack resources, we lack resourcefulness. And that quote is just so interesting because it taps on the creativity of the human being. So a lot of times we think that we just don't have any other option, and when you have one option, it means you have no option. That's just how life works. So the idea is to always come up with options for ourselves, so we feel that we are at this liberty to experience and experiment with different ways. A lot of times I sit with clients and they come to the table thinking there's no way out, this is it, you know, there's no other option. And through probing and through, you know, questions, don't underestimate the power of the resourcefulness of how you can potentially approach the situation from a different angle in a way where you're not constantly jeopardizing your financial well-being. And it could be that that's a pattern. Like, a lot of times I deal with individuals where that's a pattern in their life, where they just always, if there's an internal subconscious belief that tells you, I am not meant to be wealthy, for whatever reason, this belief was inherited by your culture or your parents or your religion or whatever, then no matter what happens in life, where you come across opportunities that presents you with wealth, this wealth will not be long lasting. You'll find a way to always get rid of it somehow, because you are supporting the unconscious belief that tells you wealth is not meant for you. So that's why sometimes we block ways to deal with situations that challenge the core being of our box. And actually, I'm gonna draw something here. I'm just gonna do a quick time check. Tommy or Nadia, can you tell me what's the situation with that?
We're good for time because we're bleeding into our Q&A, so we started early, so we might as well just keep going with our Q&A. So I'm just gonna throw it out again to everyone. If you have any questions, just throw it into the chat, and then as Asil's been doing, we'll read it, or if she doesn't see it, I'll read it out as well. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would highly recommend, don't be shy, please ask questions. Me and Tommy, we've been holding off on some of our questions just to make sure that you guys also have the right opportunity. So please do not feel shy, don't feel hesitated. It's good to have the sessions structured this way, so please go for it.
Okay, so you guys see my whiteboard?
Yep.
Okay, so this is our brain. So think about this as our brain, okay? And throughout our life, any experiences we go through, we always have new boxes that get generated. So different boxes along the way, and each box has different beliefs. For example, money equal evil, or money or love, but not both. Or let's say money or God. You can't necessarily choose both. Or I am poor. Not capable. Whatever boxes you have along the way. And it doesn't all have to be like gloom and doom. Obviously, we have good boxes too. Here, I am awesome. And you may have, for example, two boxes that contradict each other. That's possible too. So money is accessible for me, is accessible. And you can say here, money is not accessible. Okay, so you can have the same boxes as well, but and the more situations that you experience, the bigger the box can be in one direction. So something new happens in your life. This is a new event. Now what happens is this new event that takes place, it starts traveling because it needs to be fit in a box. We always live our life in that way. We need things to be compartmentalized. I hate that word. I always mix it up. Compartmentalized. I think I said it right, almost. So if this new event doesn't fit in a box of something you've already experienced that you're able to understand and identify, then it goes back into your brain and it just causes you anxiety and confusion, and it's just not, it has no place to be found. So when I work with clients, what is going on here? Okay. When I work with clients, the first thing, understand existing boxes and what these boxes are. Beliefs, that's what they are. So I want to understand what is currently in your experience. What do you currently believe in? And then, separate your beliefs from functional beliefs and then dysfunctional beliefs. And then you can start working on empowering your functional beliefs and getting rid of your dysfunctional beliefs so that you can support your new financial identity. And the financial identity that I talk about, this is what it's made of. So you have your behavior. The behavior is what you're able to see. Like, for example, I spend a lot of money. Okay. But the behavior is always triggered by a thought. And that thought is always triggered by an emotion. And that emotion is always coming from a belief. That's how deep this work is. So the behavior here is I spent a lot of money, and I'm sorry, my handwriting is usually so much better, but this is the best I can do on a whiteboard, on a computer. So the thought behind the behavior here is like maybe or maybe I feel, let me just fix this second. I'm just thinking, I want to make it generic. I don't want to be very specific. Okay, so I spend a lot of money. It could be that money should be spent and not saved. And then the emotion here, it's maybe fear or anxiety or emptiness. And the belief here is maybe money is evil, for example. You're spending a lot of money because you think money is evil. So it's very interesting how sometimes they're connected and we don't even know. But the idea is to continuously dig deeper and understand, what is this behavior being triggered by? Like, why am I behaving this way? And you just take a look at your reality and you start trying to understand what are the money scripts I've been told all my life. So I have a question here. Alessandra, how do you begin to build a positive relationship with money after identifying your money monsters? What are some strategies? Great question. So what I just showed you is one strategy. And that strategy is simply to start talking about the beliefs that are underlying that behavior. So I'm actually gonna pull up a document here. 1 second. So essentially, the idea to deal with that money monster is to identify what are the belief systems that are generating this behavior to begin with. So some of the tools require you to write down your behaviors and start writing down your thoughts and the emotions and the belief systems that support these behaviors. So you can then identify which out of these belief systems are functional, that continue to serve me today, and which one of them are not functional that I need to change. Alessandra, let me know if this answers your question. I was actually going to be pulling a guide for you. There's a guide called ABCDEF. Actually, it goes all the way. And it's like you identify the activating event. So you identify the event, you notice your behavior, and then you dig deeper into basically it's what I told you, but they just worded it differently. Nadia, in your experience, what are some common beliefs you inherit from your parents in money matters that might be good to be aware of? Everything you inherit from your parents is good to understand, because it impacted you one way or another. So, for example, if our parents told us something along the lines that money doesn't grow on trees, or, you know, anytime you asked for something as you're growing up, there was just never a discussion to why you can't have it. It was always like, no, you can't have it, or we can't afford that, or you know, we don't need these items. We don't need this new bike, or whatever the case may be. So it's not so much only about what you were told by your parents. Sometimes it's also what you tell yourself as a result of what you experience or what you see. So a lot of the stories we make up ourselves. So for example, if your dad told you you can't buy this new thing, maybe in that moment as a child you told yourself, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm just not, good things or nice things are not meant for me. So it's more about understanding how you created that story, and how do you now today, even as an adult, continue to live this unconscious pattern that you created as a result of things you were either told by other people or things you told yourself by how you witnessed other people around you. And parents obviously have a huge impact. So there's no such thing as common beliefs, because every single family is different, but there's definitely a common way in how we deal with things as humans. And unfortunately, a universal story that no longer serves us supports that money comes in our life through struggle and hard work and sacrifice, and just this, like, there's just this very dysfunctional way of how hard it is to make money. And that's often shared by a lot of people, but it's not everyone's experience. There's people who experience a very easy flow in money in their life. And guess what? They're usually labeled as, corrupt, or something's fishy about them, or whatever the case may be. So notice how you judge others around you, and see if you can pull up some of these beliefs, like the belief systems I told you guys about. You can notice some of the dysfunctional ones simply by observing how you feel about other people. Whether it's you judge somebody who wears a certain item, or drives a certain car, or has a certain job. There's so much you can identify simply by seeing how you interact with others around you. Question from Chidanmai, I hope I'm saying your name right. I have made some recent purchases, and I believe most of them were necessary, but I have been feeling guilty about the purchase, and now I'm wondering if I can live without them. How do you separate your needs from your wants? And what is a healthy way to approach spending based on your wants? Beautiful question. Absolutely beautiful question. So for somebody who struggles with identifying needs so basically one way I like to think about it is extrinsic wealth and intrinsic wealth. There's items that, and that's a very personal thing, by the way, what I perceive, like, there's no formula again that applies for everybody. One of the questions I like to ask people who spend a lot of money on things mindlessly, and mainly they spend it because they want others to know that they, like spendulas, for example. If you're a spendula, I ask my clients this very interesting question. If you know this saying, if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? So based on that question, I guide my clients to think, if you buy this item and no one knows about it and no one sees it and no one even notices it, do you still want it? And if the answer is yes, then there's something about this item that provides you with intrinsic wealth, and that item means something for you. So you should find a way to make it work with the right budget, obviously. But at least now you identified that this is an item you want. But if the answer is no, then most likely you're buying this item for extrinsic wealth, and it's not going to be long-lasting wealth. You're buying it because of a void and an emptiness that you're feeling that you think this item will fill. So in other words, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it also is something called value-based accounting. And value-based accounting is to start creating different accounting systems based on your values. So it's not the typical, here's my assets and here's my liabilities. It's to become even more aware of the values that you care about and infusing it in your accounting system. So for example, if you put a budget and you recognize that I am able to put away $100 a month where I can spend that $100 in whichever way pleases me. If I want to spend it in that month or just accumulate it and spend it at the end of the year, then this is my fun money. So you can call this account even my fun money, or you can call this account my wants account. This is my wants account. And after a few months, obviously you need to work with a financial planner or advisor to come up with that budget that matches your circumstances. But then when you're taking money from that account, you're spending it consciously, but you're also aware that you're not hurting yourself in that process. Because it's a very mindful way of going about it, then you would actually experience the pleasure of spending. So you're not associating with guilt because it's based on values that you care about, and because you've actually identified it to be money you're able to part with. And that's after you've saved money for your retirement, you've saved money in your emergency funds, you're on a saving plan, but there's also a room for play along the process. And that's why a financial plan is important, because it helps you identify how much can I afford to spend on myself, so that my spending is no longer associated with guilt. A lot of times our spending is associated with guilt because there's a lot of ambiguity around what's going on with our money. So when we bring light and when we bring facts, and when we have a healthy relationship with money, then we're able to deal with this feeling, the guilt feeling associated with spending. And sometimes I hope this is helpful, but please let me know if there's anything else I can do. I'd actually would like to see the guide, or if you could post it. Do you think everyone should work with a financial planner? So it depends on the financial planner. There's different ways where financial planners are compensated in many different ways. There's fee-only financial planners where their advice is fiduciary, which means it's completely client-focused and it's based on what works for you, and it's not based on what product they're trying to sell you. Then absolutely, I think it's very important to work with a financial planner in that space. But just be cautious that there are certain financial planners out there where their advice may be skewed based on how they get paid. And I know that the regulatory body is trying to add measures to protect the consumer in that regards. So I'd be careful from that angle. But what's more important for me, financial planning is crucial, but also the emotional and psychological relationship you have with money. So working with a money mindset coach or like a financial therapist, which is a very new interdisciplinary field. And I really value it because as a financial planner myself, I still continue to hold my designations as a financial planner, but I focus more on the emotional side because I think it's the missing piece. I can give you all the strategies in the world, but if there's a belief system that tells you that you cannot do this, then you're just not going to do it. Actually, this may be a good time. So I actually facilitate group coaching right now. I'm working more with group than just individuals, because I feel that this is a space. There's healing and sharing, and the more we get used to talking about money, the less of a taboo it becomes, and the more we're able to come up with our own breakthroughs and aha moments. So that's why I love the idea of groups of people sharing their money. So if any of you is interested in learning more about the group work that I bring together for people to talk about money while I facilitate the conversation, feel free to reach out to me. I can share with you my LinkedIn profile, my website, whatever information you need. It would be helpful.
Yeah, Asil, if you want to send that to me, then I can do a post out to all the webinar attendees. Yeah.
Sure thing. Somebody's asking about the guide. I was just gonna pull it up. So let me share my screen. Okay, so this is the, I was telling you guys the ABCD. So it's similar to what I was drawing in my very interesting whiteboard here. So you look at the event. So the event could be like, I'm paying my bills, or I have to have a conversation with my partner, or I have to, negotiate my contract at work, or whatever the event is. And then look at the beliefs about what you tell yourself about these things, and then notice the consequences. Well, as a result of this belief, that's how you can start identifying this belief is no longer serving me, or this belief is limiting me from living my life fully. And then you kind of start creating new ways, start introducing new boxes. So in this particular diagram here, I said if a box does not exist, even if something new happens in your life, it's just not going to go anywhere. So we need to identify what boxes already exist, and these boxes are your beliefs, and then work with creating new ones that support your new identity. So
now that you're talking about the guide, how often would you say for someone to actually do that kind of exercise, like a self-check?
So when it comes to self-reflection and self-work, I think this is a lifelong journey. Even, I am mentored, one of my mentors, a financial therapist, he's in his 70s right now, and he's been doing this work for over 40 years, and he continues to learn new things about himself. And it's fascinating because it's also humbling. And that's why we need to learn to be self-compassionate and experiment with self-love along the way, to recognize that this is a lifelong journey. How often we want to do it is, I personally have my daily reflection prompts where I think, and because I practice it so often that sometimes it just happens on the spot. Like as I'm buying the latte, what's the word? I'm aware of how this particular experience is making me feel, versus somebody who never thought about money the way I think about money, because it's my work and my life's passion. So I think it may seem like a lot of work in the front end, because you're putting a lot of work in something that's new, but then eventually it just becomes natural. You just start thinking about it almost simultaneously as whatever you're experiencing takes place. And here's something else I'll let you know, which I thought was a very interesting way of looking at it. If you have a penny today, you have a penny, and you double this penny over the next 30 days, how much do you think you will have after 30 days? Write me some questions, write me some speculations or answers in the chat box. So you have one penny today, and you're doubling this penny for the next 30 days. How much would you have after 30 days? Let me see some answers. Come on, guys, just random. $6, okay. A little bit higher, Francis, a little bit higher. Maybe 10, okay. All right. You guys can Google this. So I'm getting the highest number I got was $10. You guys can Google this. 5.3 million. Google it. I'm not joking. And the reason I bring this example, my jaw dropped when I first heard that too. But the reason I mention it is because this is how I look at the self-development journey. When you're working with your relationship with money, it's a self-development journey. And the way it works is at the beginning of the self-development journey, it feels like you're putting a lot of effort in, but you're not getting much out. So you know, 1 penny becomes 2 pennies, then becomes 4 pennies, then becomes 8 pennies. And it just feels like I'm putting a lot of work and I'm just like counting pennies. Like, you know, there's not much reward. But by the end of that journey, which in my opinion is lifelong, but in the example we're using for illustration is 30 days. So towards the end of the 30 days, you know, you're putting the exact same amount of work, but your reward is just so much more. And that's because it's just a habit. And I bet a lot of you are now Googling this, and I definitely encourage you to. I didn't make that answer up.
Yeah. So I just wanted to just do like a time check. So we have one more question from Nadia, and I think we can close the Q&A for today. And she was just asking, what would you recommend as the next step after learning about money monsters today?
I honestly recommend that you start and continue reflecting on your beliefs around money, because they actually have a much bigger impact on the reality that you're experiencing. You may think that a lot of things are out of your control, but ultimately our lives are nothing but a reflection on what's going on internally. Our external world and everything about it, a lot of it has to do with what we're internally, the belief systems that we're internally exuding out. So it's very helpful to start uncovering what that world is. What are my belief systems? What have I been told about money? What has my experience been about money? And how does my current reality support these belief systems, and how can I change it? So start asking yourself these questions is a great start, because it's gonna be opening your eyes on certain things, to explore it further. Like it's the start of a long journey, and it's a very rewarding journey. Alio, how can you reach me? Great question. So I'm gonna put my information here. I hope this was helpful. Like I hope I answered some of your questions and just at least offered you new ways of thought. So this is my LinkedIn. Oh, only host can send a message. Oh, sorry.
1 second.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
So this is my LinkedIn, and I'm also gonna put my website. And on my website, you're able to book a consultation with me.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Asil. This was very, very informative. I know we had talked about it before, but we always kind of did a high level, but just to like dig deep into it a little bit of the personas, those money monsters, and just to see, okay, this sounds a little bit like me. This also sounds a little bit like me, and all the work that like you said, has to be done on the forefront just so you can see the return later on. This is really, really helpful because as we've talked about, it's essential to really understand our relationship with money just so we can, when we get to the practical side of building wealth or growing net worth and all that stuff, we have a good foundation. And that's for anyone, male or female, but you know, for women helping women over here. Yeah. So we're about to wrap up the webinar. Thank you guys so much for coming out for the first one. Just a few things, like I still said, we'll try and get the recording out to everyone, and then I think Asil, you said there might be some work, like like just a few like workbook things that you could
I'm
send?
actually, yes, I'm very happy to share with you the worksheet that I created as a follow-up for this monster work. So this
Yeah.
is work. Uh, it's truly, I think this is where, you know, when you sit with yourself and ask yourself some of these questions, that's where a lot of the realizations start coming out and you start piecing the pieces together. I'm
Hmm.
more than happy to share that with you and you can share it with
With
everybody.
everyone, yeah, because I think that would be a good just like just to keep that top of mind for everyone, and it's obviously voluntary, so if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't. And last thing I will say is like, well, we're probably also going to send out a little feedback survey just to get your thoughts on the session and what you think we can do differently, and also just to get some suggestions on topics you guys would love to see in the future, or people you love to hear from, that kind of thing. So yes, that is me. That's all I have to say for now. Nadia, anything?
No, that was, I mean, you covered it really well. We're just about under 2 minutes. And so I really hope everyone had a good time. I've learned so much more. Like me and Asil and Tommy have always been talking about this for a little while, but it's a little different when you go through the process. And I would highly recommend, we can obviously share the sheet, but for anyone here to go through that work exercise, take some time for yourself really to, understand what that relationship looks like. Like you just got a little flavor today, right? Like it wasn't in that depth that we want you to continue to think about. But I mean, hopefully you'll be coming to our webinars that will be, forthcoming. And so we can touch base on some of these topics and we can kind of see that transition and that journey along the way. So I'm just looking forward to hearing from you guys again. And then thank you so much, Asil. I know that this is a lot of work and effort. And so for those who are here, this is, it's kind of like nice to have it put together, but it's months and months, if not years of actual work to get to this level. And so I truly appreciate that. So again, thank you so much for your time and really sharing something with us to this level and taking the time out to do it.
My pleasure. It's my life purpose, and to get to share it with anybody is an honor. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do that. And there's so much more to talk about this topic, but next time I'll make sure there's no one doing the dishes around me.
This is a bad background noise. Okay, so we'll sign up here for today, and we wish everyone a really good rest of the day and have a great weekend. All right, bye.